Hi, fellow disruptors. We're so glad to have you back as we continue our series and discussion regarding key concepts in Tracey's new book, Match Striking for Beginners, Activating Individual and Collective Change for a More Just World. As we have throughout this series, I am taking time to talk to Tracey about one of the key concepts she explores in detail in her book. And then in the next episode of the podcast, we'll bring you another insightful and impactful disruptor who can explore that concept in their own work and their own life. For those of us who want to use our gifts and abilities to make the world a better place, we often ask ourselves how. How do you take what is breaking your heart and turn that into action, achieving impactful and sustainable change? In her new book, Match Striking for Beginners, Activating Individual and Collective Power for a More Just World, Tracey gives you your playbook to ignite power from the margin, inviting you to discover the pathway to a more just world by recognizing your personal power and unleashing the superhero within you. In this roadmap for individual and collective change, Tracey draws on her own unique perspective and lived experience as a queer woman and shares actionable steps she used to amplify her own personal power to create personal and societal change. Tracey's method incorporates essential practices and bold moves to help you break through blockers, to ignite your inner superhero, activate collective power, and drive the social change our hearts ache for. You can pre-order the book now on Amazon, and we hope you will listen in to not only learn more about Tracey's key concepts, but also meet some amazing inspirational guests. Hi, fellow disruptors. This is Michelle. My pronouns are she, her.
And this is Tracey. My pronouns are she, they.
And hello, my love. I am glad to be sitting here with you again as we get to continue our conversation about the message of your heart and what you share in your new book, Match Striking for Beginners, which I know I've said before, but I am so very proud of.
Well, I was just fixing my microphone, which is like all over the place
It's like
today.
on you.
It's like on me. It's trapping me. It's like bouncing. I'm like, why is it so close?
Well, clearly we're professionals. So.
To adjust it. But anyway, yes, I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to be talking about my book. It's been so long since I've seen you. And I'm sitting here looking at your new ink on your arm, which is beautiful.
I
it's
did.
Flamingo.
Yes, we both got.
Carly
would
be so excited. Apparently, you need to send a picture to her.
That's a good
since we
point.
had flamingo conversations during that episode. So yeah, it looks amazing.
Thanks. Yeah. It's really pretty and colorful. Yours is colorful too.
Yes.
Only slightly overshadowed, I would say, by your recent injuries.
Yeah, we won't talk about my experience playing softball. I will just say that at some point you reach an age where, not that you shouldn't be out playing physical sports, but you should just be, you should just think twice about it before you go diving into playing softball for somebody.
Personally, selfishly, I should say, for me, it was really hot watching you play. So I've reached an age where I get exactly what I want. So sorry about your injuries, but I had a great time.
I got a little bit of a banged up knee, so. But everybody thought when I got the banged up knee, they're like, "Oh my God, that was such a great dive for first base." And I'm like, "Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Didn't do it on purpose, but it
not intentional.
It sure looked good." Somebody even said, "I loved how you rolled out of that. Like, I wish I could roll out of that like that." And I'm like, the whole thing was I tripped over my own feet and went diving into first base. So it wasn't even planned, but apparently it looked amazing, and that's all that matters.
Well,
except for my knee doesn't look amazing right now.
No, it's a little banged up, but I just feel like that is probably the quintessential metaphor for life, right? Like, it's just, as long as you can roll out of it and look like you meant to do it, then you're killing it, killing the game.
That's right.
Can I also highlight something else that is almost as exciting? No, it's more exciting than watching you play softball, marginally maybe. But we are only 4 months out from your book launch.
I know. Actually, I was going
to. Is it 4 months?
I was going to talk about that. It's a little over 4 months. Okay. So June 25th is the book launch. And so we're getting closer. It's exciting.
How do you
exciting
feel?
To think. Yeah, I mean, it feels great. It's It feels really great. It's hard to believe.
Yeah.
Like it's like right around the corner. So I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, well, I am really excited for you and for all the work you've put in,
Hmm.
which is also one of the reasons why I really enjoy getting to have these conversations with you. I do think our fellow disruptors enjoy hearing from you, what we like to maybe call like teasers, right, of some of those key
Hmm.
or core concepts. So, in the first episode of this series, where we're really highlighting key concepts of your book, we were talking about some of the aspects of your book that are that I would say are like the differentiators, right? That make your book unique,
Hmm.
such as your lived experience and credibility. We talked some about your chapter activators.
Hmm.
We also talked about the fact that you share very real and raw stories of from your own experience and from people that you know,
Yeah.
and how really throughout all of those kind of key components, right, you're elevating this playbook for the historically marginalized communities
Hmm.
that you and I are part of and that so many other people are part of. So I was hoping we could jump in today before talking about one of those key concepts and talk about another aspect of your book.
Hmm.
And this is something that I thought was really cool because I've been, able to see this as it's come through. But if you don't mind, I would like to talk about your test readers
Hmm.
and some of the feedback you received and some of what people are saying about your book, because I think there's an aspect of that you can really talk to our fellow disruptors about.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to talk about my test readers. So.
Cool. Well, these are all people, certainly that you have known well through your journey. Many of them who I have had a chance to get to know as well.
Yeah, yeah. Some of them. So I think it's good. I think one of the things and one of the reasons we're talking about this is people have been very interested in the whole process of writing a book
Mm,
and what that looks like, and any advice or insights I can give into that process. And part of the process is as you are writing, when you get your first draft done, one of the things to do is you identify a number of test readers and you allow them to read your first draft and provide feedback. And then later on in the process, once you've got a couple of drafts, once it's went through like an editing process, you'll go back to some of the same and you'll maybe go back to some new test readers.
mm,
People do it differently, but it's important to have test readers for a number of reasons to get feedback as you're continuing to kind of refine and tweak that original manuscript that you have. And so for me, since my audience for the book is primarily women and people from historically marginalized communities, it was important for me for my test readers to be from those groups
mm,
as well to get feedback from them. And as part of that process, one of the things the publisher will ask you to do is ask people, if they feel comfortable to provide also an endorsement that you can use publicly. And they use those endorsements for a number of things, right? Like from marketing to just even when they're engaging with book sales reps and others to utilize those to show that here's some of the responses
mhm,
from people actually reading the manuscript.
mhm,
And for me, it was a little bit of, they kind of give you guidance on how to choose your test readers, but all I wanted to, you basically ask them a number of questions, and you take that feedback that you get and you incorporate, you may incorporate some of the feedback, you may not incorporate some of the feedback. And then at the very end, of course, you ask them, if they like the book, if they want to speak about the book, and if they're willing to do an endorsement, to ask them to write you an endorsement you can use publicly. So what I will say is that all my, I didn't need that many endorsements. And all of my test readers did provide me an endorsement. So that was, really nice to have. But the test readers came from all types of demographics. I had a goal when I was really writing the book. I thought, I want to be able to reach all ages. And I want, when I say all ages, all adult ages. And I thought, it would be awesome if I could write a book. And I know it was a really, audacious goal to be able to impact not only Gen Z, but millennials, but also people who are of an older generation,
Mm-hmm.
to really have an impact, or wherever they're at in their journey,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's early in their journey, whether they're far along. They may be somebody that's very involved in social change. They may be somebody that's not involved at all. And so, I really I wanted it to resonate across those ages. And so that was, many of my test readers were in their 20s, and some were in their 30s, and some were in their 40s, some were over 60. So it was really cool to kind of see their perspective and their feedback from their specific experiences and journey. And so it was exciting. It was exciting to see. I remember when I first started getting the endorsements back, for me, it was like, oh, wow, okay. Like, wow, my message does resonate.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was almost like a wow factor. Like, you almost didn't expect it, to a certain extent, that they would come back and say, oh my God, I loved your book, or oh my God, this really was impactful, and here's the reasons why. And from all of those age groups, that was so meaningful to me. And I was really moved, and I was very appreciative that the people I chose, whether they knew me well or they didn't know me that well at all, there were people that I chose that did not know me that well,
Mm-hmm.
that they they really, when they made the commitment to read it and really give me genuine feedback, they did. And I think part of it was because they were moved by the book, that they really wanted to be a part of it. They told me they wanted to be a part of it, and providing feedback on it was really important for them. So that was cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'd go back to, kind of touch on at least a an observation I had when you were talking about how cool it was to see that your message really resonated right across this spectrum of people, regardless of, like personal characteristic, or I guess kind of, marginalized community aspect, across age, across where they are in their journey. And I think that it's because there's such a fundamental aspect that you really hit on in your book, that you really key in on, which is that I think we're all at some point asking ourselves the same question, right? Whether I'm 20 or 40 or 80, or whether I've, been on my journey for a long time, or whether I'm just starting. And so I won't, dig in more than that, just like leave that tease out there. But I do think that it is very obvious that you really keyed in on the very like central aspect of the ability to activate your not only personal power, but also that collective power to drive towards the
Hmm.
change that we want. So good job.
Hmm.
So don't just take it from me that you did a good job. I'd really like to read some of the feedback that these test readers, at least a few of them, provided, because I think that these particular quotes give our fellow disruptors a real insight, again, into that spectrum of test reader that you chose, and what this meant in a very individual and impactful way to certain of your test readers. But it also carries, I believe, a common theme, as we'll hear. So all right. So the first quote that I want to read is some feedback from Kaylin Otto, who is the author of The Art of Unruly Travel on a Budget. And Kaylin is also the creator of unrulytravel.com. Our fellow disruptors who've been listening in on our journey through the Disruption podcast may also remember hearing from Kaylin during their episode, which, if you haven't had a chance to listen, definitely go back and find that one. It's really good. So Kaylin said, getting to know Tracey Breeden in real life is such a joy, but reading Tracey's story and wisdom through these pages is the second best thing. From personal tales in childhood to making change in professional settings as an adult, Tracey shows us that making an impact is possible if we're willing to speak out. Packed with actionable tips and real life examples, this book will leave you feeling inspired, empowered, and ready to stand up for what you believe in. Super cool.
Hmm.
Do you want to say
Yeah.
anything more about Kaylin, or about their thoughts, or what do you think?
No, I think this, what you're reading is their endorsement. So they gave me, a lot more feedback than what you're actually reading. But Kaylin, I would say, is a very young activist that kind of lives in that Gen Z category. So it was super cool and meaningful to hear from somebody in that age category and who is already very much involved in activism in their own right.
Mhm.
To that it was meaningful to them, and that they would refer it and share it with others.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So the second endorsement, a bit of feedback I'll read is from our dear friend Jessica Johnson, who is in the tech industry, right, working for an organization as the director of product. Jessica says, I am thrilled to see this book come to life. As someone who, one, believes in Tracey's vision, two, needs inspiration to act, and three, could use a framework for delivering on social change, this book is exactly what I and so many others need. The tools, the encouragement, the inspiration garnered from Tracey's lived experiences and other anecdotes, all of it together in one place, is going to provide so many people with opportunities to create social change, many who may not otherwise be able to deliver on it.
Mm.
Yeah, I thought it was a good one.
Yeah, I worked with Jessica. Jessica was on my team at Match Group, and it was such an honor to lead her, to coach her along her own journey. But yes, she was definitely one of those people where I chose a couple of former colleagues to also read the book and
Mhm.
provide me their feedback. Caitlin, I met at the Women's Travel Fest. So if anybody listens to the episode there, that's how I engaged with Kaylin and a couple other what you would call Gen Z influencers. And I remember going up to a couple of them and saying, "Hey, I want your feedback on dating apps," and was engaging with them on other topics, but it was like, I want to hear from you. This is what typically people say about Gen Z and related to safety. We were talking about safety, how you feel about safety. And I want to hear it directly from from your own mouth, what each of you feel about it. But I had engaged with them several times. They had also heard me speak, and that's how I met Kaylin, was through that. So somebody who doesn't know me really well versus who's engaged with me at different events, but somebody like Jessica, who worked very closely with me. So it was great to get, like I said, different perspectives from people.
Mhm. Sure. Yeah. The third bit of feedback that I'll read in this kind of endorsement piece is from another person very near and dear to our hearts, Miss Carla D. DeBow, who I'm going to say what like I have written as kind of, the brief soundbite of kind of who she is or what her experience has been. But rest assured to our fellow disruptors, this does nothing to describe all of the experience that Carla has had in her life. So Carla DeBow is a retired corporate executive, retired middle school teacher, and retired diversity consultant. And is currently still just as active as can be, doing all the work in another space. But those are, like, again, very brief sound bites as to who this person really is. And so I think, when Carla provided you her time in test reading and also her endorsement, like, I think there's just so much wealth of experience she has that the endorsement is really packed, right, with I think a lot of where she sees this
Hmm.
message or could have seen this message.
Yeah, I think Carla's one of the first disruptors, as I call them, over 60 crowd, who back in the day was very instrumental in disrupting things in the way they were,
Mhm.
and has unbelievable stories, amazing stories of her experience in corporate America, as well as just in her lifelong journey. And I was probably one of the most moving endorsements that I got. And what was moving about it is when she provided me her feedback, she said in the endorsement category, because everybody sent me their feedback via email, in the endorsement category, she goes, "I'm not going to give you my endorsement until I talk to you in person." And I thought, oh boy, okay. And Carla is a neighbor who lives in the same area as I do. She's not like a next door neighbor, but she's in the, in the kind of cul-de-sac area. And I had engaged with her and interacted with her, but she absolutely did not know much of anything about, me. Outside, she knew I traveled a lot and who I worked for, and we definitely have engaged more since, and in many different reasons, or for many different reasons, in many different ways. But at the time, she didn't know me that well or know my history. And so when she sent me that and said, "I want to, before I give you an endorsement, I'm going to talk to you in person. And I want to come over to your house and talk to you in person." And I thought, okay, what's going to happen? Is she, what's she going to, I mean, the feedback was amazing, but I was like, what exactly is she going to say to me? But I won't. She did come over, and it was and we sat down at the table together, and it was a conversation that was full of tears. Both of us, like, I was just so moved because she told me a part of her story that I won't share because I don't have permission to share that. I have permission to share her endorsement. But it was deeply moving to hear her story and her wanting to show me gratitude in person. And that was just, I think, in that moment when I received that from her in person, it was a huge reassurance to me that there is something powerful about this book and about this message that has the ability to really create deep and powerful impact. And it just showed me that through her experience, through her tears, through her gratitude, and how she envisioned, the book and the message creating impact, how she saw it through her eyes. But it was such a moving experience. It was so powerful for me. I'll never forget it, and I love and adore her. And um, I'm so deeply grateful that she took the time, and then after that she wrote the endorsement for me. So with the help also of her her granddaughter, who she said that typed it for
Mm.
her as she talked about it. So it was also super cute because we know her grandchild, um, and who also babysits for us, who is also an amazing human being in her own, or in their own right, really shaking things up. So I'll let you read the endorsement now, but I wanted to tell a little bit of the backstory because I'll never forget that moment when she came over and told me her personal story and how this had impacted her.
Yeah, so Carla writes, while reading Tracey's book, I was constantly presented with the opportunity to reflect on being an outlier for 18 years. I was a Black female in an environment dominated by white men. My company at the time struggled greatly in human resources. Upper management would turn you into a target of condescension. You had to fix the problem of not, quote, fitting in. I wish match striking for beginners had been available when I became an executive with the power to change things. I would have incorporated it into our training program. It would have resulted in a safer, more understanding environment for all. Tracey's book is filled with powerful lessons that can be successfully applied across many workplace environments. For instance, education would benefit from the concepts Tracey presents, welcoming the fact all children are different, so shouldn't be taught alike. Match Striking for Beginners is a compelling book that will take those that are narrow minded to open minded, provide clarity to those who feel trapped and invisible, who feel dismissed, anxious, and frightened, giving them hope that they can change things rather than quit life. Tracey's book lets you know it's okay to be who you are because you are valued and safe.
Yeah.
So it's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very meaningful endorsement. As I read it, I just hear in her words that she that she felt heard
Yeah.
in reading that book. She felt seen,
Yeah.
and that was one of the most important things for me to do with this book.
Yeah. So I think, one thing I was going to ask you about before we move into the book concept we're going to talk about today,
Hmm.
and you touched on this already, but it sparked a question that I was curious to have you answer for our fellow disruptors. So you talked about, these are the endorsements, certainly that people very willingly and lovingly provided after reading your book, but they also provided you other feedback.
Hmm.
And being not entirely privy, because this is your process, but somewhat privy to what that feedback looked like, to the questions that you asked your test readers, and the ones that gave you answers to. I know that some of that feedback, again, was lovingly, but was constructive, right?
Hmm.
It was these people wanting you and your work to be the best it could possibly be. But how did you decide on what to incorporate, right? I mean, this
Yeah.
is your message, right, in your voice. And so when you look at the constructive feedback, I believe I'm accurate in saying, like, you did take some into account, like made some
Yeah.
changes, and then there were other times that you had to decide, like,
Yeah.
that's not how I want to articulate the
Yeah.
message. Or what was that like for you?
Well, first of all, nobody tried to take my voice out of it or away from it. So most of the feedback, at least the majority of the feedback, nobody ever said, "Hey, you shouldn't say that," or "You shouldn't say that way." There was no feedback like that. All the feedback was very much, I feel heard in this, and etc. What I most of the feedback I received is, can you do more of this? Can you add more stories? Can you add like summaries, at the end of the chapters was one of them. Because when I first wrote the manuscript, I didn't have chapter, I call them, I created them chapter activators. It was just like somebody said, hey, can you do a summary or highlights to help me, or something to help me, like some kind of takeaway that, like, I can actively like do something. So, can you give me a summary? Can you give me bullet points, things that I should go back and reflect on from that chapter? So there were things like that. Can you add this? Can you expand here, or expand there? And so when it came to whether I took it or not, if my gut felt like, you know what, that's good feedback, that makes sense, I incorporated it. If it didn't, I didn't. So there's a lot of feedback on expanding, where also I would think, I was thinking, well, I'm already thinking about writing a second book or a third book, and that's something that I will address in the second book or the third book. So people were really into it, and most of it was, can you add more? Can you give me more? I want to hear more. There was feedback like, I really enjoyed hearing elements of your personal story. Can you talk more about your personal story? Can you give me more stories? Where I was really, the way the book is set up is, I'm presenting, how I went about, how others have went about in their own personal development journeys. How do they, drive change? How do they get to that point? And so I'm using real life stories to drive those points home. And some of those real life stories are my own. So it gave people a window into seeing into my own personal journey. And so there was a lot of feedback around, we want to hear more of your stories. And then there are people that had differing feedback. So most of it was, can you expand here? Can you expand there? Can you do these things? And I think some of the feedback I heard consistently across test readers too, where I would hear three people said the same thing. Can I have a summary at the end of each chapter? Can you do that? I would love that. Other people do it. If you look at Martha Beck's book, she does it in a way. And so it was a little bit of like, give me more was more of the feedback. So that, when I decided to do the summary, I thought, well, I don't want to do a chapter summary like everybody else does it. My typical way is, okay, how would I do it? What would that look like? What would I provide people? What type of questions would I ask them? And so I created those at the end of every chapter, and I called them chapter activators because I felt like it was information that could help you action on the advice, on the direction, on the information I was giving you. And so that's the type of feedback that I received for the most part. And it was very helpful. Like I said, people really dove deep and wanted more. And so that's exciting. That means they'll want to read my second book when it gets done and comes out. I'm already putting that out there. So,
All right, well, let's focus on the first book
mhm,
while you continue to like manifest the second, and let's talk about the kind of this idea of the key, one of the key concepts that you do discuss. It's very early on
mhm,
in your narrative, and really, it's about embracing your personal value.
mhm.
So, what does that mean to you?
Um, you know, I come from the place of I would not have been able to create the change. I would not have been able to do what I had done or achieved and achieved with others and organizations had I not started with myself first. And it meant that for me, change begins with self first. And you have to do the personal work first. And so embracing that you have value, doing that personal work first. And so I talk a lot about how by doing the personal work first, then you can effectively have impact, not only in your individual life, but also collectively with others. And it's a really, really important step to recognize that you have value and then work on that journey of really feeling that about yourself, because so many people don't see the value in themselves. They don't identify that they have personal power within them, right? To be fully and authentically who they are. And by doing that, that it also can help them along that pathway of achieving their desires and their goals, as well as making an impactful difference in the world. So, being able to value yourself, recognizing your personal power and self, and that you are enough to create change, to me is critical. It's critical. And if you're not able to do that, or you're not on that journey of doing that, you're not going to be able to build community for meaningful collective action. There's power in that. So early on in the book, I started very much focused on self, and a large portion of the book is that journey of how, if you are, and how that looks different for somebody who is a woman or somebody who is, from a historically marginalized group, how that looks much differently as you go on that journey, and how you can effectively, meet those challenges, those unique challenges and barriers that you face.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I have some of my own soapbox theories, as you've heard probably several times
Hmm.
before, about, I'll just call it the paradigm that so many of us are in, that just basically tells you and continues to reinforce this idea that you aren't enough, that you don't have, power. I think there are reasons why that resonates with me and so many others. But why do you think so many women and people from historically marginalized groups, as you were just describing, continue to struggle with the feeling that they either are not enough to create change or they don't have that personal power
Hmm.
within them?
Well, I talk about, several things connected to that. One of the things that I'll kind of tease, that I do talk about, is that one of the reasons that, one of the main reasons I feel that there is a very unique struggle there is due to rejection. And it's hard. It's very hard for women and members of historically marginalized groups when you've been wounded over and over again, when you've been told. And when I talk about historically marginalized groups, certainly I'm talking about women with also other intersecting things like, being queer, being a woman of color, being a woman from an indigenous community, people with disabilities. Those folks have we have a history, right? A history of rejection. And whether you're rejected from the time that, at young, it starts to really be weaved into your experience and your
Mhm.
culture. And whether it's said exactly like that, whether you're, rejected through word, through behavior, through society, what our culture tells us, in corporations, in our experiences, we experience rejection, micro and macro, at nearly every turn. And it can be very overwhelming. It's an enormous challenge to overcome in really embracing your value and seeing your worth and knowing that you are enough when it feels like everywhere you turn, you're being rejected.
Mhm.
And so that creates a huge challenge and a huge barrier to work through. And that is one of the reasons why it's also very difficult for us to not only recognize and embrace our own personal power, but then to use it, to then leverage it, to be ignited by it. It's very hard to do when you're overwhelmed by the weight of rejection that is a part of, people who are marginalized in their experience. And so I share lived experiences in the book of others, but I also share my own personal story of rejection and how that has impacted me and how it impacted my journey that I took to getting where I am today.
Yeah, so in sharing this, I think this response, this concept of kind of why there is this very unique impact on the groups that we're talking about, how you share your story and your lived experience. What's your hope?
Mm,
What's your hope as to what the reader gets out of your book
mm.
as a result of reading?
Well, I mean, you hear it in some of the endorsements, right? I want people who read this book and the audience that I'm targeting to feel like, one, they've been heard, that they feel seen, but they also walk away feeling inspired and empowered like they never have before, with tools that they can use to activate their own personal power, their own collective power, or together with others collectively. And that it helps them. It really just ignites them. It's like a catalyst for them, to really move into that space where they can ignite and accelerate those next steps towards that personal expansion, and finding a way and identifying ways that they can, collectively from that margin rise up together, to create not only a better self, but a better world. And so that's why I say, part of this book for me is really the mantra for me of wanting to unleash superheroes. I want people to walk away from the book feeling like, oh, I'm a superhero too. And I can unleash other superheroes and we can create a better world together. So I really want people to be able to, walk away from the book, feeling ignited, but feeling also seen and heard, and feeling like they have tools that they can use that are really going to be helpful to them in doing exactly what I talk about, igniting their personal power, being able to achieve the desires of their heart, while also not only just that individual change, while also being able to collectively work with others to create social change.
So just like a small, you know, kind of change the world like result, I suppose. I love it.
It's connected to all I do. It
Yes,
is the
it
message
is.
of my heart. It's weaved in my own lived experience. It's my approach. It's the wisdom that I have and the wisdom of others that have come together. And it really is like lifting and elevating those who are in the margin, who are impacted, understanding that, parts of that lived experience that is unique, to specific groups, and then some of it that just kind of, it's shared by all those groups, and how we can together rise up and really create impact, because I do believe that we are the ones that have to lead and we are the ones that have to create that impact. And we put a lot of energy and time into trying to, convince others to recognize that or do something about it. And sometimes that's a lot of wasted energy where we can put that energy into ourselves and others like us, to really rise up and create impact. And those allies will, come along. But it begins with us first and with us and ourselves first, before we can have that kind of impact collectively.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I also know that this idea of embracing, right, your personal power, unleashing that superhero within you, is, as you've already described, a very foundational concept of your experience and of your work and of what you are gifting to the world. And there's also a lot more to it than what we've been able to dig into today, but we're
Hmm.
going to leave it here,
Yeah.
because there are a couple ways that our fellow disruptors can dig in a little deeper themselves. Number one, you can dig in deeper to this particular concept and the rest of Tracey's key messages in her book, by picking yourself up a copy of the book on
Hmm.
June 25th. You can pre order it now on Amazon. And then, as I just said, it will be officially available in your hands or on your Kindle on June 25th. And then, as we typically, or not typically, I guess, but as we have in this series, we will have a guest in our next episode
Hmm.
who we will talk to about this key concept. And do you want to let our listeners know who that's going to be?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be connected, in ways to this concept, but we're going to talk to, the extraordinary Nan Watts in our next episode. She's a life coach, executive coach, and founder and owner of the Watts Collective. She'll join us to discuss how she is influencing the rising leaders of tomorrow. And we'll also balancing the challenges of marginalization on the basis of age. So excited to have Nan. Nan's, she's pretty amazing. I know we both, know and have engaged in with Nan, not only a personal level, but a professional level as well. So excited for, people to tune in and listen to that. And I'm excited to keep talking, talking about the book. And, for me, it's about getting that message out there, the message of my heart. And I know that if people, final message, like if people can truly embrace the value that they have personally, recognize the power that they have within them, and just love themselves fully and completely, there's great power that comes from that. And it, creates this, this superhero that's waiting to be unleashed from the inside. So I'm excited to for people to read it, identify with it, and if they already say, "Hey, I'm a superhero," hopefully it'll give them a little inspiration, remind them they're not alone, and help them identify some new tools they can put in their toolbox to create a better world.